Hey everybody, this is Paul. Real quick before we get into the podcast, I just want to let you know that I have launched a new newsletter called Local News Industry Pulse, and it is a briefing of news, policy, trends, and more in the local news industry straight to your inbox every Thursday morning. So if you're enjoying the content I'm putting out with the podcast, I think you would also get a lot of value from the newsletter. So if you have a minute, go subscribe really quick to Local News Industry Pulse. You can scroll down in your podcast app and click on the link at the very bottom of the show notes right now, or go to localnewsindustrypulse.beehiiv.com. That's localnewsindustrypulse.beehiiv.com/subscribe, and you can sign up there and stay informed on everything that's going on in the local news industry every Thursday. All right, thanks. Let's get into today's episode.
And so the idea is kind of going back to even MTV, if anybody still remembers how that was all brought together, right? They brought a music sheet, song, and they had video to it, and it was a whole different product, basically, to consume music. It wasn't a 30-minute show. It didn't fit any of the formats, but it was really well accepted. And so that's really what we're doing is we're taking what normally might have been a written story, and we're adding a video content to it so it's more engaging and fun to listen to.
This is Small Press Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. All right, today on the podcast, I'm joined by Laurie Sigillito. She is the founder of Local News Network, which envisions a world where rural communities are vibrant and thriving with easy access to local information. Laurie, we've actually met in person. You might be the first person I've met in person for this podcast, but it's nice seeing you digitally. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, it's fun to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's I'm excited for this one. So if you could just give us I kind of just read your little thing off of LinkedIn, but if you could just give us a brief bio about yourself and your career and what led to Local News Network and where that idea came from.
Sure. Well, for those of you who can't see me, I have been around for a while, so I have a pretty long career. I actually started in technology with where you were doing data integration, data on, I can't remember what they're called, little cards, and you did your typing in the cards. So I started out in programming very early on. Went to work for EDS out of Dallas. If you guys remember Ross Perot's system. Yep, and did more technology, moved to Silicon Valley, did a stint there for 7 years, and then moved to New York City and worked for an Austin-based company called Evolutionary Technologies, ETI, doing data integration. And in that role, I got to manage the big database companies and trying to help get them to share their information between databases, which is complicated, as you can imagine. Everybody wanted everybody's data, but nobody wanted to share their data back. So anyway, I learned a lot during that whole process. And then I moved to Durango, Colorado to raise my kids. And there really was not a great way to travel at that time to work in the high-tech industry. So I opened a fast signs company, which allowed me to actually begin introducing technology into kind of the old historic signage business. And we started doing data or digital out-of-home networks. So digital displays, which then caused us to have to create content and video ads. And that was just when really YouTube was starting to take off. So about 15 years ago. And it's just kind of propelled me in growing and understanding how to create content. What kind of content do you need? How do you share that content? And that's kind of my background, which kind of led me to the need for local news.
Yeah. And I mean, you're in the same region as me. You're probably the closest geographically to a person that I've had on the show right down the road in Durango. Do you still run the Fast Signs company as well?
Yes,
you do?
I do. I've learned a lot from running Fast Signs and understanding the franchising model and the value that a corporation, that if it's as good as Fast Signs is, that it can provide people in rural America to be able to run a business with a lot of good support and background. So I've taken a lot of what I've learned from Fast Signs to try to apply how I do this in rebuilding local news.
That's interesting. I just asked because I actually worked at the Coors distributor in Denver for a decade in my 20s. And I was pretty close with some of the people we had our own in-house sign shop that did all like the banners and neon and stuff all over town for events and everything. So I always really liked they were kind of a motley crew that stuck out in our corporate environment there at the distributor. So I just interested in that.
The sign industry is fun, and really all it is advertising. It's about somebody's logo, putting it on something and pushing it out there. And so that's really what drives local news is advertising. So it was interesting. You would not have thought it was an interesting transition, but it has been.
Yeah, it's like I never would have thought of that, but you're absolutely right. So could you tell us about Local News Network, what it is, what it does, what its kind of goals are? And maybe speak a little also just to why you became interested in local news in particular, a little more.
Yeah, that's a good question because really the media industry and news, I really did not know or understand anything too much about it when I first tapped my toe into it. But what I was really trying to do was how do I use the digital out-of-home technology to rebuild how local news could be produced and delivered. And so the idea is kind of going back to even MTV, if anybody still remembers how that was all brought together, right? They brought a music sheet, song, and they had video to it. And it was a whole different product, basically, to consume music. It wasn't a 30-minute show. It didn't fit any of the formats, but it was really well accepted. And so that's really what we're doing is we're taking what normally might have been a written story and we're adding a video content to it so it's more engaging and fun to listen to. And that can be anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes. And allows us so many different ways to be able to distribute that. And it allows it to be consumed in so many different ways as well. So the premise is really those small video news packages. That's the beginning element of it. That then allows us to figure out how do we distribute that in a way that's very easily repeatable. So almost then you go to the Facebook, YouTube, Google, model, and you go, all they are is a pipeline. All Netflix is a pipeline, right? And so how do you rebuild that pipeline with video news stories is kind of that main piece going in. Video, there's so many different ways we can do it, but that's kind of the main piece of is the backbone of what we're doing with Local News Network.
That's awesome. And what about the business model? You talked about, it's all advertising, local news and everything. How has that taken form? How's it work on that end?
So the business model, we're working on looking at a couple different ways to do it. But the one I think there's a couple ways to do this depending on which town you're going into. But the idea is that we teach people how to launch a media business in their town. Now, I think our sweet spot in rural America is anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 type of thing. We can go bigger, we can go smaller, but that's kind of the place we want to go. And we want to first try to work with somebody in that community that might want to own that affiliate licensing piece there and teach them how to produce these little video news stories. And then we provide the whole distribution and pipeline for pushing it out. They sell ads locally. We can sell ads nationally. And together, we end up making an amazing pipeline. It's a Facebook basically, but with us creating the content and a focused distribution with advertising behind it.
Okay. And so and I believe you and I spoke about this. Could you call it a franchise model where you kind of eventually sell it to them, or is it necessarily always like that, or are you just kind of hiring like contractors that are locally in the town?
So I think we're going to be doing both. We're not franchising to franchise. That might be the direction we end up going as we continue to launch this. But right now, it's a pretty formidable approach to really building out a whole franchise model and what's required legally behind that. So we're starting more with a licensing agreement, an affiliate station, teaching people how to launch their own, or we're launching it ourselves and building it out, and then we'll spin it off to an affiliate. So one of our growth strategies ideas is that, one of the things that's unique about us is we have about half male, half female, which is kind of fun. We have about a third of our people that are over 50 and a third of our people that are like in their 30s and a third of our people that are in their 20s. And so I think that the 20-year-olds are amazing, and they're really teaching us how people might want to absorb the news. They don't want to pay a subscription, I can tell you that much. And so they're guiding a lot in how we build and distribute this into towns. So trying to leverage off that next generation concept, we're looking at getting people that are graduating from college with a business degree and a multimedia journalist degree, bringing them into town, really training them on how we do things, and then deploying them into a town that we know needs news and rebuilding that town. We felt like we could have a fully functional, really great news operation within 2 years. And at that point, we can either bring in new people out of college or somebody could buy it. There's a lot of different ways we could take it from there.
That's interesting, the distribution of ages. That's really cool. And I think, like what you said, I think Gen Z or Gen Alpha, whichever, I think they get a bad rap. All of them that I meet are all like super more emotionally stable than I was at that age, have their act together, tech savvy. They're, so that's cool to hear. I also, doing this podcast, I've heard a little bit that there's not as much young talent coming out that wants to be in like rural or local America. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true, because I talk to a lot of people anecdotally that have younger people and are like loving it and working with it and everything. Where are you located right now? You're in Southwest Colorado, right? 4 or 5 locations. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Yes, we're in our flagship where we've really started is in Durango, Colorado, but we have moved into Montezuma, which is Cortez area. And then we've moved into Farmington, New Mexico. So we have that piece. So we're in kind of the Southwest corridor. And then we also have Telluride, which is definitely not 10,000 people. So it's like 2,400 people. So even running our business model works for them. They just produce a little less news, and they knew we've learned how to do their news. So we can all build and share off of each other as we're creating different news types of stories.
It's funny, being in the region. There may only be 2,400 people that live in Telluride, but they probably got the net worth of about 300,000 people concentrated in that space. If you take a look at real estate there or anything, so I can see that working.
And the name Telluride is way more interesting than Montrose. So even the name they have going for them.
Yeah. What made you decide to tackle video? For coming in this as not an outsider, you have a tech background, but like an outsider to journalism, and because to me, it seems like that seems really intimidating. I do audio, I do podcasts for local, which seems maybe just me because that's my background. But yeah, what made you go after or video?
Well, I don't think I had any clue what I was doing when I started. We probably all wouldn't do what we have done if we really knew what we were getting into. But, when with Fast Signs, I competed against Clear Channel to win the advertising contract for the Durango airport. And that was about 20 years ago. And at that time, it was all just wall, ugly displays. And so that's when digital out of home was just getting started. And so I went ahead and put digital displays so we could sell more ads. We could make it more exciting, more, interesting at the airport. So I invested like $40,000. It was very expensive at the time at the airport. And then I had to get advertisers to just try to pay $150 a month to advertise there, but they didn't have their ad. And at the time to create an ad, it cost so much money that it stopped them from wanting to even pay the $100 a month. So I ended up buying a video production company in town to help me amortize the cost of producing those ads, and get me up and going. And as part of that, we had access to the TV station to do a little something running there. And so I had one of my partners come in, Deborah Yaroda, who had a news background, and she's like, we need to start doing news. And so then we had no idea how to do that. I talked to my nephew, who just graduated from college in video production. He came from LA out to help me, and he kind of helped us get it all started. And it's just kind of been building, testing, finding different things on how we shape it and build it. So it's taken us about 7 years to really get this honed in on the best approach.
And that's how long? That's when you launched a local news network, 7 years? I guess I didn't ask that.
Officially 2019 with the local news network. Previous, we were called other things, but really with our current model, what we're doing was 2019.
Okay, gotcha. Another question I had is, so the actual news you're reporting, the correspondents, or I'm not sure the term you use for them, the journalists, is it original reporting? Is it like curated from other sources? How are you actually sourcing the news, finding your stories and like your content you're putting out?
Right. So we're producing the news ourselves. And we're pretty much using just a simple, easy video camera or our cell phone for the most part. And because our stories run for 7 to 10 days, it tends not to be like these really quick hitting sensationalized stories. They're more interesting, longer term, at least, more evergreen type of news stories that have better B-roll that would go with it. And so we've really just made it as simple as possible to broken down the whole process of creating a video news packet, from the scheduling and finding the story to writing, videoing it, getting the script, getting the B-roll, producing it, reviewing it, and then releasing it. So we've really cut that down and understood each of the processes and figured out how to do it in the most efficient way.
Okay. And I was just watching a video just kind of from your home page, and it's, it's good. Are you using any, I guess I was going to ask, like, are you using AI or any editing tools to kind of put these things together or anything for any graphics, or it's just basically simple? You just want to get the news out, basically.
Yeah, we just want to, no, we're not using AI. We will use AI. I think AI is,
it's a huge time saver. That's what I've come away with.
But it would be silly not to figure out. We use it to help us be more productive, but not to write the news. There's definitely a hard line there. We'll use it to help us write ad scripts even for ourselves, or create little new jingles, or, we definitely will use it for things like that. But we find the news stories. A lot of times people out selling will give us news stories. People are watching our news will push us news stories. And then our local journalists will go out with their camera or their cell phone and basically record the interview, and then get B-roll that they think might fit. But when you've been doing this for a while in a town, you have a whole archive of B-roll you can find. We always try to use local B-roll if we can. If not, we'll use some stock footage. But yeah, it's all produced by us.
Today's episode is sponsored by localpod.co. LocalPod offers podcast production and consulting for local news organizations, and only local news organizations. LocalPod creates weekly news podcasts based off of the top stories from your publication. You provide the script, we handle the rest. We narrate your news, edit it, produce it with a custom intro and outro with music, and distribute the podcast to all available podcast apps. Your listeners will see your branding and hear your content in their podcast feed, just like wherever you're listening to right now. Podcasts are one of the most engaging digital formats, which is why we can also help you monetize your podcast as well. We offer custom ad reads for your podcast, and we can also set up subscriptions so that you can monetize your audience directly. Have you thought of launching a podcast but want to control it in-house? We can help you with that too. LocalPod offers podcast coaching. We offer in-depth one-on-one coaching calls, along with the actionable steps you need to launch a successful revenue-generating podcast of your own. To find out more, visit localpod.co. That's localpod.co. Or just click on the link in the episode show notes in your podcast app. All right, back to the show. You talked a little bit earlier about kind of being the pipeline and, being like a plug and play for new affiliates coming on or whatever. How are you finding distribution and finding audience in the small communities you're serving? What's the kind of tactics there?
So it's really grassroots, and we're not about trying to put funny little memes out and get people to follow us. And that's really not what we're about. We're a slow growth, organic, very sticky platform once you get started on it. So we might do a story on the local football team, which then gets shared on social media, which then gets people to share it with their grandparents, who then want to have aunts and uncles look at it. And then they want to stay in touch. And then they sign up for our newsletter, and they'll get our newsletter. They sign up for our mobile app, or they follow us on YouTube. And so we have a lot of different ways of organically growing what we're doing. And we haven't done anything. We have not even marketed, honestly. We've just grown it organically at this point.
Well, I mean, that's the absolute best way to grow anything, really, a business or an audience or anything like that. I always think of it like one brick at like a pyramid, one brick at a time versus just like, Silicon Valley venture-backed hyper growth, grow or die. Like, that's the alternative. I'm like, it's not as stable or anything like that. What's the reaction been from the community? You get like individual feedback, anything cool you've heard from the audience?
It's funny because we don't get a ton of feedback, but we do get people, can you put us on your news? Can you tell this story? That tells us people are seeing it. mostly our hosts get a lot of feedback like, oh, I saw you here. And, because with digital out of home, we're putting a digital display into the community. So it could be at the liquor store has a digital display up and running. Maybe it's a drive-through at the Alpine Bank Airport, maybe Alpine Bank drive-through. Maybe it's at Happy Pappy's Pizza where they're sitting and watching. And so they're seeing something local on the TV that normally they think they could turn the channel and watch ESPN, but it's actually just a channel with all local information. Their local businesses advertising. And so there's a lot of anecdotal, stories about, oh, I saw you. Oh, that was cool. I saw you at the airport. I saw you here. So we get a lot of that. A lot of people signing up for our newsletters, downloading our mobile app.
Interesting. I didn't know you had a newsletter component also. That's very cool. How's that been? That's been like the trend for like on this podcast. And I have a newsletter now too that I do. And like, it's just popping up everywhere. They're popping off. Everybody has them. I have obviously I just said I have my own that I'm talking about them in. Can you talk about that piece a little bit? Yeah.
It is. Yeah. So when we talk, what video does is it is like the subset of media, right? So we do the one story, and out of that one video news story with sound, we'll pull out the transcript, we'll push it into closed captioning. So now we can run it without sound. So now we have a couple different ways of distributing it. Then we will take the audio and we'll push that out into a podcast. We take the story itself and push it into an e-newsletter, push it into all of our viewers. We put it out on social media. We put it on LinkedIn, which we've actually just started putting things on LinkedIn. We feel like that's really a place we haven't used, and we think that's a good place. But Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere. And we put the transcript in the website itself. So we use like every little piece of what we create with that one story. So we put time and energy into one story, and then we take and slice and dice and push it out any way we can so people can consume it however they want for free.
That's awesome. Have you experimented, since you're creating video anyway, have you experimented with embedding, I don't know about how easy it is, embedding video in like an email newsletter? Like on mine, I use Beehive, so I don't know what your like software you're using, but I can put like a YouTube video right in there that people can click out from. Try to do that.
But the video doesn't automatically start running. They have to.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, so that's the same as ours. So we push our story out in a newsletter, and they can either read a little subtitle of it, or they go and listen to it on our podcast system, or they go and watch it on our video.
Okay, I gotcha. I also wanted to comment, you mentioned the TV at Happy Pappy's. I was in town a month ago where I met up with you for West Slope Startup Week, and I definitely went to Happy Pappy's. It was really good, actually.
It was good.
And they were very short staffed, so I had to wait a bit for my pizza. So I was definitely watching that exact screen. So I could have caught some of that going on.
Stories.
Maybe I did. I don't know.
And honestly, I don't think people really understand where this news is coming from. I don't think they really know that's local news network, or that's Durango local news. They don't really know that. And I'm not worried about really them knowing. I just want them to be able to watch. If they're watching the news, then our advertisers are being watched. And that's the value, is trying to get those advertisers in front of those people watching our news, because that's their potential customer.
Could you talk about the advertisers for a minute? Because I mean, this is about the business behind local news, and that's what makes everything work. So, like, who is advertising with you? How are they creating their content to be advertised? Can you talk about some of that stuff a little bit?
Sure. This is the key element of, really how do you build that? And when they have to have a video to get started, that's like a big roadblock for them to paying you. It's just the same roadblock we had when we were trying to get them up advertising at the airport. But, there's a people are more adapting to video. They all want their video. And so a lot of people now have a video, but there's not too many places they can run their video for an ad. They could put it out to YouTube. They could put it on social media. How many times you can do that? So we actually provide them a really unique way of being able to use the video that they invested in. But we can also very easily create GIFs, save those GIFs into videos. We can do things, call to action, lesser expensive type of pieces. If they really want to do something good branding, then we will work with them to produce a video if they don't have one, or we'll introduce them to somebody local who can produce that for them. We're not trying to grow our business in producing ads. We'll do that to help people if they need it. But there's lots of ways to create a quick video ad to get your information in front of our clients or viewers.
What kind of companies are advertising? Just kind of spitballing, like listening here. I'm like, I think it'd be really cool for like a local real estate agent to have a video of a house like in the town you're in, that there's something like that. Have you seen any examples or kind of industries that like it? Or
yeah. It's funny you say that. Let's put a pin in that and talk about real estate in a minute. But local banks, they want to be able to reach the locals. It's really who wants to reach local in that community. And right now, we're actually very lucky in Durango and Farmington and Cortez, the three I'm in. We have a really good newspaper with the Valentine, a private family that invests great in news. And so many places don't have that. And so we're able to survive along a really good, well-performing newspaper. So I imagine our ability in a lesser performing or a news desert, we're probably going to do really well. Yes, banks, the healthcare industry, the restaurant industry, local car companies, the Closet Plus, all kinds of different businesses that rely on local people find this is a great way to, and we're not going to be, they know we do good stories. We do stories that celebrate the community. We're not trying to do quick hitting, sensationalized type news stories.
Yeah. I imagine the pitch would be easy enough to explain to like a more, in-person, in-town established business too. This is like the new digital version of your old TV station, People are going to see it. It's going to be on. They're going to be watching. It's going to be, you're going to get your brand recognition right there and everything. And you mentioned Valentine. Is it Valentine or Valentine?
It's Valentine.
Valentine.
Yes.
Yeah, they've come up so much recently. I'm having like these synchronicities.
Really?
I was just speaking with I just reached out to their CEO on LinkedIn.
Yeah, John Blaze.
Yeah. And then when I was in town, I was just on a walk between kind of meetups at the West Slope Startup Week. And their building is just beautiful right on Main Street down there. And I was like, man, this is gorgeous. It's so well kept and beautiful building.
Yeah, they just invested quite a bit in rebuilding that. So yeah, they're a very well-known family. In fact, it's an amazing story. I don't need to go in it to sell them, but you can probably do a story. John is he's their newest CEO, and I think he's going to do a lot with that company. So they're continuing to invest in the model of newspapers. The challenge is newspapers are in survival mode. And so one of the things they did was to create a paywall and subscribership, which I understand. But what that does, just that business model alone, is it causes you to be a little bit more sensationalized, to try to get those click-throughs, to make people to want to pay. It is a little bit of a nail in the coffin for the younger generation. They're not going to pay it. They want the news, but they're going to go get it somewhere else. They're not going to pay that subscribership in that really younger generation coming up. And so I understand why they put paywalls up. I think it is the final demise of the way local news has been produced in the past.
Yep. I just put a story up in my newsletter that I found from a week or two ago about the Salt Lake Tribune, which I think they were the first major daily to become a nonprofit and everything. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of on a mission now to go to eradicate it and get rid of the paywall is kind of their mission. Yeah. And I don't think they're there yet or anything, but yeah, nobody they call them a necessary evil, I think, in the story. Yes. Yeah.
No one wants to give up revenue. So have revenue is hard. And I thought my business model with what we're putting together, I thought newspapers that are in survival mode would just immediately want to let me try this model, but they don't. They have an anchor with the newspaper. They have this cost that goes into it. And it's very difficult for them to think about changing their whole medium and thinking they can get more advertisers if you're charging less, because we don't have the same overhead of being able to produce the paper. And so what I thought would be an easy, they would be my low-hanging fruit of who I would start selling this to, that's not the case. It's rebuilding a whole new ecosystem around local news with what we're doing, just the same way as MTV did.
And if I could put a theme on what this podcast has been so far, you just wrapped it up with a nice bow on it. It's like, I love newspapers. I have fond memories of growing up with the huge Sunday Denver Post and everything. But this is about the news, getting the news out, and all the bright spots I've seen just doing this podcast. It's all lean, digital first, newer organizations, like you said, just that overhead. And I love newspapers. I don't want them to go anywhere, but there's got to be a compromise between that and something somewhere, cutting some stuff.
Right. My feeling is even, MTV, the radio did not go away. Nothing goes away, it just kind of levels out. And then a newer piece kind of takes on. And so I feel like there's just going to be a continued movement towards a new way of getting your news.
Yep. Video did not kill the radio star. I guess.
It did not. It did not.
Yeah, you're right, though. I'm a fancy podcast producer. I'm creating and consuming digital on-demand content all day. But when I drive to the grocery store, guess what? I put Jack FM in my truck.
Right.
And I'm like, listen to it on the way over there and hear local ads. So it's true. Let's go back to real estate. I mentioned that when I was talking about advertising. What were you going to point out with that?
So I think real estate is definitely, people are spending money on real estate, but it's not a simple market to break into. So we put together a package that said, hey, you real estate, million people here in Durango that are selling real estate, we'll produce a quick little video ad for you that highlights your ad. So they all kind of have the same look and feel, but our viewers will be able to feel comfortable watching. Like they know this is going to come up next. We'll run ads in between it. We'll play it at the airport. We're going to play it on our displays. We're going to put a special place in our newsletter to advertise the homes and so forth. But what happens is these real estate people, it's expensive to list a home. So you list a home and then you have to pay something monthly to be able to advertise that home, and they're trying to sell that home. Mm-hmm. Most likely that home is not going to be sold to somebody in this town. It's going to be sold to somebody traveling through the town, somebody that is reaching out. And so they have so many different ways to place their information, or get their information. I still think the product we have will be interesting and useful more for them getting listings for people like, I'm going to sell my house. I know Gillian is working really hard, or Dan Corman working really hard. I see them all the time. They're really promoting the homes that they're selling. So I'm going to go with them. So that's a real win, too. So I think you have to, again, figure out how you're positioning what you're selling. As we grow this, maybe the Durango real estate people want to push their home into Telluride or into Salem, Oregon, or, who knows where, so I think as we grow our network, that changes, that the model changes of how and where people can advertise.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't really thought about that, but you're totally right. It's more advertising for people like me who are like, oh man, I'm charmed by Durango when I'm here. Maybe I should move my family here. And then I look at real estate prices and I'm like, oh man, maybe not right now.
Yeah. Maybe I should Aztec. Yeah.
And it's funny also, like, how many years have I seen realtors' faces plastered on billboards and bus benches, to list the home? So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned, like you said, if somebody does, maybe they want to move to Montezuma or whatever. Have you seen any advantages from having kind of the regional distribution, kind of a network effect? Because the towns are pretty within, 100 miles of each other or something like that.
And we've done that, yes.
I would imagine that'd be the way to move forward. Did you do that intentionally, just to try and grow from there? Yeah,
intentionally, because I've been working on doing this really for 10 years. Just kind of playing with different things, what works, doesn't work. So we really landed on a model that is scalable and then really tuning that model. And we actually went out to try to raise money about 3 years ago, and we really weren't ready. People are like, that's a great idea. Sounds hard. Good luck type of thing. And we're like, okay, let's quit trying to raise money. Let's go back and really prove we can do what we're doing. And so our focus was really honing our infrastructure, honing how we produce the news and distribute that news, and just building out a strong infrastructure. Now we're at the point where we're ready to start scaling and growing into new towns. And so we have a couple of different go-to-market strategies, like I've mentioned, that we're about to go out and test a little further. So I see us going from these 4 to 6 to 10 to 50 to 200 to 400 to 700. I see that kind of growing out, that scaling up that way.
And then you hit those network effects and everything as they grow. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, actually, in that spot. But yeah, where are you looking to expand to next?
So,
I'm pretty familiar with the region, just out of my own curiosity.
So, we've been talking to Canyon City, Fremont County area, which would be kind of interesting because they have the Royal Gorge. They have a lot in common with Durango. So it would be like maybe interesting to share advertising. So that might be a place. We've talked to the stakeholders in the community and they're interested, but we haven't pursued it further. We've talked about, we were in Archuleta County, Pagosa for a little bit. We know they would like us to come back there. So that's not big, but it might be the next easy, simple step. And then we're talking to people, like I mentioned, in Oregon, and really, like, there's no reason it couldn't be completely somewhere else. There's no reason.
Right.
It doesn't have to be right next to each other.
How big is Durango? It's like 20,000?
Yeah, 24,000. But, with tourism, it gets up to 100,000 probably in the tourist.
Right.
Part. Yeah. But, yeah.
And then is that the biggest of the ones you have right now, population-wise?
Well, Farmington's bigger.
Is it? Okay, I've never been to Farmington, so I wasn't sure. I wasn't aware.
And it's such a different town than Durango. And that's what's important is that you can't make one thing fit into each town. And so what we're just trying to build is that infrastructure for how you do things and how you push that news out. And then in each of the towns, it really needs to be that person in that town. Sports, football is a way bigger importance in Farmington than it is in Telluride. Right. Snow ski, like each of these different towns needs to have their own culture, their own feel, their own pride of what they're trying to show in their news.
Is Farmington on the reservation?
No, it's bumped up to one.
Is it bumped up right next to it? Okay, I knew it was close. I was just wondering. I'm picturing the map in my head.
Well, and it's interesting you talk about the Native communities, because that is something that just in our heart and soul that we, as my founders and I, want to do is. We just feel like there's no reason why we couldn't provide an affiliate into the Navajo Nations or the Ute Mountain Ute or they want to be. And they could be actually producing their own news in their own language with it subtitled in English, and closed captioned or vice versa, however they want to do it. And it just is for their community. It doesn't have to be shared with everybody else. And so there's, we think that could be really cool. And
I think that would be really cool. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're trying to figure out the best way to approach the Native American nations and try to figure out how we do that.
Okay. So we kind of talked about your journalists and how you've got some younger folks and everything. How are you finding them? How have you found the people so far? And do they enjoy what they're doing? I'm guessing they would. They're part of their community and everything.
I think, they tell me they're having a good time.
Of course.
I think it's a very interesting for being a small business. We can offer such an amazing, not internship, but that first step from college to getting to your next point, which is where I think a lot of people are having problems. And people coming out of college, they're very good in what they do. They've learned a ton of stuff, but they really don't want, go to corporate America. It's kind of like a big type of thing. For me, like I graduated, I wanted to go to corporate America, type of thing. That was like the big thing. Now they don't, and they want to make a difference in the world. And so we can take a multimedia journalist, that's somebody who's learned how to do all types of forms of journalism, and a business person, and we can teach them what they need to know from our standpoint. We can put them in a community. They can, within 2 years, learn, the journalist is going to learn how does a town work? Who's the sheriff? Who's the county? Who's the city? What's the water rights? What's the, who are all these nonprofits? And they're really in 2 years going to understand how a town operates, what's important to show in the news, what people want to hear in a community. And while they're learning that, they're learning how to host a show, how to script a thing, how to do video editing, how to, interview. So they're learning all the parts that you need. So when they leave after working for us for 2 years, they can go get a job probably almost anywhere, and they know what they want to do for their next step. Or maybe they want to stay with us.
Yeah. Or, become an affiliate of their own or something like that. Yeah, and that's an amazing, role to have if you want to go to another media company too. Like, I've produced every single part of this footage. Here, how many hours of it do you want to see? That's great.
Right. Yeah. I understand how a town operates, and every town operates pretty much the same, but maybe a little different, but once you understand how a town operates, you can be a much better journalist, I think, moving into others. The same is true for a business person. So a business person selling advertising, going into a rural town, they have to learn how businesses operate to sell advertising. How does a mattress store sell and make their money, and how do I help them advertise versus a plumbing company versus a car company, a hospital. All those things, they will get such a learning in how you market and sell and businesses operate. So they'll come out after 2 years with really a good background to know where they want to go.
All right, so Laurie, what's the long term? You kind of talked about it, but what's your long term vision for Local News Network? If everything goes exactly 100% as you want it to and gains traction, like where does it end up being?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think you have to take it back to what would make me feel great about this company? And I really have big visions of what we could do. And one day I would love Local News Network to be named one of the most admired companies in the world, because it has respect from its journalists. It has respect from the communities it's serving. It has built this a really amazing distribution piece of good, useful information that rebuilds communities. And so I really have a pretty strong Northern Star of where I see and want to build this. I think there's no reason it couldn't be a big multi-international company. There's nothing that keeps it anywhere. And I'd love to think that we built it out of rural America.
Yeah, that's the awesome part of it too, the grassroots nature and everything. And I would imagine as it grows, that just becomes more and more likely too. The more traction you get, the more. Had a guy the other day, I was just talking about him before, Dan Olson, and he was talking about he has a website called golistnews.com, and it's basically a multimedia advertising platform. It's really, really cool. It'll take me longer to explain right now than it's worth. You'll have to go listen to the episode, I guess. But he was saying that somebody once explained to him that kind of getting these enmeshed legacy players to move, it's like trying to talk to a herd of buffalo. Mm-hmm. It's like you can coax them and try and get them to do all this, and they're just going to stare at you. But as soon as one of them moves,
right,
the others will start moving, and it's kind of that. I thought it was a great metaphor. So,
it is a great metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the way I've been looking at it too. Okay, I think we covered everything. Is there anything I missed that you wanted to bring up about Local News Network? I think we touched on just about everything. This has been really...
Yeah, I have no idea exactly who's viewing or listens to your podcast. It'll be kind of fun to see if anybody, reaches out. I would love to, if anybody feels like they would like to launch this in their community, have an interest in or feel like their town needs it, I would love to hear from them. So if you could, I guess my information will be available to them.
Yeah. So, and go ahead and tell us now, like where can people find you and Local News Network and anything else you want to share or for me to link to? And I'll
Sure.
I'll link to all of it. Yeah.
So you can look at thelocalnews.us is our corporate website. And then my email address is Laurie, LAURIE @thelocalnews.us. And yeah, reach out. We're ready to grow and expand. And we're just looking for the right next step.
Yep. That's what it takes. It takes a lot of great people to bring this thing together and everything.
Yes.
So, all right, yes. Laurie, thanks for coming on. And yeah, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Sure. I appreciate the invite, Paul.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.